Today I'm joined by James Cruickshank of Spear Physiotherapy. He's a runner himself, but the reason I've asked him to be here is because he's a physio for runners. And why don't you start by telling us a bit about your running and what you do as your day job?
Yeah, so I've been working here at Spear for just gone for 10 years now. It was probably about 6 years of that ago. I started really focusing on running myself as a hobby, and it kind of transferred into my day-to-day work. Did a lot of research on how best to avoid running injuries. It goes against what I kind of do, is trying to stop people coming to see me more than anything else by preventing them from getting injured. But a lot of my learnings was based on my own running and the research, and a lot of things I would trial out myself, and then trial with clinic and trial with a lot of guys in here. And it just seems to have grown and grown and grown. The next thing, I'm doing a lot of profiles in-house, doing a lot of gait analysis, and a lot of the joy I get out of my work is working with runners to achieve goals. Half marathons, 5, 10Ks, any distance is fantastic. So I literally spend probably about 80% of my work nowadays treating runners. I tend to focus on lower limbs, so probably from pelvis down, but I'm aware that everything's linked, so we kind of have to appreciate the upper body as well. More recently, since the pandemic, a lot of my work is actually focusing on the foot and the ankle. So it's went from the whole body down to lower limb into the foot itself, and then I'm starting to slowly start to tease out how that means for runners and how I can stop people from getting injured. Yeah.
Is that because it was easier to do? Like, I assume you did it remotely during the pandemic.
So I did a lot of travel before the pandemic and was covering a lot of multi-sports. So I was away out with a curling team to Russia when pandemic hit. So when we came back in with literally 2, 3 weeks of work, and then we were told we can't come into work for 3 months in total. So because I'm self-employed, that meant no clients, no treatment, no money. So I kind of devised a way of taking my classes online. So I did a lot of foot work during the pandemic, doing foot classes, and I did a lot of learning, so a lot more time. And then transferred and doing a little bit more once we're back in the clinic, looking at the foot more closely, and it's just kind of escalated from there itself. Um, the pandemic was a real tough time for ourselves as physios because we're very hands-on. So having the online calls was just not the same as being able to touch, feel, see, and like try something. Because a lot of our work is trial and error. It's not so much we give you a prescription or a recipe. We've kind of got to see what works for you as an individual. And sometimes that's so hard to do over the camera itself. So we did struggle through pandemic, but what we did find worked really nicely is that we could actually be effective to our clients by providing an online class where we could actually engage with the people that were doing the classes. And my classes now are more me doing the exercises with them, but actually looking at their form through the camera. So we've learned a lot of different skills through the pandemic itself.
When you say classes, do you mean like a group of people that are doing all the same thing, or is it a one-on-one?
So the appointments were one-on-one initially, but because we were coming back into the clinic with less time to see people on telemedicine, so what I started doing for runners is set up like a foot fundamentals class. So looking at how can we engage with the floor, how can we engage with our environment a little bit better, and that is pretty much a Zoom call with about 5 or 6 people around about it, and I'm able to go through their screens and look at how they do a specific drill. So we're all doing the drills at the same time, but looking at how they control their movement, how they're able to load their foot, and it comes back down to the fundamentals of can the athlete or can the client load through a stacked foot, which is can the knee come over the foot, can the hip come over the knee, come over the foot in a sequence to allow the foot to propel us forward. So it was looking at a lot of the fine details in the class. If you go for more than 5 or 6 people, you tend to find that it gets watered down too much and you lose track of what everyone's doing. But that's kind of where we're at just now.
I find people were almost embarrassed to say what they were doing in the class. Does that make a difference?
A lot of the people I've worked with in the classes have kind of followed my work for a bit of time, so they kind of know me quite well, and I know them quite well. Although saying that, this time around, there is a couple of clients who are down Glasgow and down Edinburgh and Stirling who I've never met in person, but we've met through the Unlace the Brace course, and also from just being on the online classes, and we've developed a relationship where they're quite open to feedback.
Yeah.
and also I'm quite happy enough giving them feedback either one-to-one out with the class or in front of the other people in the class as well. But nobody gets picked on. It's not one of these things that you're doing this wrong. It's more like try changing the weight onto your big toe rather than being on your heel. How does that feel? Oh, that feels better, or that feels worse. Okay, let's come back to the heel. Let's try bringing the hips forward. So you're able to find a way, because I don't have all the answers either. So sometimes it's more trial and error as well.
You find that has made your business worldwide, or is it predominantly Aberdeen but Scotland based?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So going back a couple of stages during lockdown, one of my clients who runs for GB, she said to me, "Why don't you make your online class into an ebook? Because once you go back to work, you can then have people all over the world have your ebook." And it's funny because with the stats that come back from the ebook when it gets sold, I'm like, I've just sold one in Australia, I've just sold one in China. It's like, how can they've never heard of me before, but they want someone for their foot. So we're all kind of like linked with the same kind of injuries, but me delivering a foot course is something quite new for a lot of the runners out there as well. So although the books kind of went worldwide, the input I would have over it would be mainly Aberdeen. I would probably see a lot of people with a few external people. I work remotely with a few different athletes in Wales and England and also in the Central Belt itself.
Is that just because word of mouth spreads better within Aberdeen because people know each other rather than worldwide?
I think so. Yeah, I think as well the social media side of things. Like with social media, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll put a video out there and I'll be either singing along to a song or doing something so it gets your face known. And then they'll drop a message saying, "Oh, I've had problems with my feet. Is there anything you can do to help?" I can either direct towards an ebook if that's what they want, or we can direct towards a one-to-one. So it opens up. Whereas before pandemic, it was very much, if you're in Aberdeen, you can come to the clinic. If you're willing to travel to Aberdeen, we can see you in the clinic. Whereas now it's like, oh, you're in Dundee, perfect, try this, or we can do a one-to-one on Zoom, or if you're in such and such a place. I've actually got a client I work with out in Thailand. He's away there for 3 months, and we do weekly catches up, just see how his running is getting on and where he's at. So it's definitely opened up the world from that side of things.
Where can people find you on social media and watch your entertaining videos?
Oh, well, God, the more embarrassing than entertaining, I would probably say. So I'm on Instagram as at physio run. My website is www.physiorun.net, and that kind of houses all my blogs about marathons, nutrition, hydration, the best routes around about Aberdeen, my favourite podcast. So it's pretty much, I write a blog a week, so I tend to put a blog up there every other week itself. I'm now going through a lot of podcasts where I review the podcast and put up the main points of that as well. And yeah, it's all on the physiorun.net. The subscription to that allows you to come into the weekly class. So I think it works out as £5 a month, and the class turns out as being £1.25 a week. So it's pretty much peanuts. But it's such a good class to be involved in because there's so much fine detail that gets put across. I'm on Facebook as well, but probably not as active on Facebook. Instagram tends to be the key place, and the reels, unfortunately, are there forever as well. So yeah, if you see me sing along to I think it was Shaggy was the last one, then yeah, that's pretty much me. I'm quite laid back, and I think that's when we go back to that question you mentioned before: is how do people feel getting feedback from you? I'm quite laid back, and I'm not really like driven to show people up. It's more like, let's try and figure out a way together, because I don't have all the ideas or the answers, and you might not have all the ideas and answers, but when we work together, we're able to come up with how best to find a solution for your issue, rather than this solution works for a genetic problem, or does that work for you? And I think that that's the best way to find a way to manage injuries.
Okay.
And as long as people have been running, the research nowadays shows that there's still 80 to 85% prevalence of running injuries. So even with new shoes, new recovery forms, Theraguns, cryotherapy, all these different things, it's still 85%. So as long as a human's in control of their training, there always will be injuries. So it's trying to educate athletes around about when to push on and when to pull back, so that they're actually managing their training load quite well.
What would you see as the most common running injury?
A lot of the injuries happen because of poor load management, or doing too much, too soon, too often. The main principles of training itself. Probably not knowing what a training recovery pace is versus a training tempo pace, or what's a race pace versus a recovery race pace. And we tend to see a lot of people run the same speed for a lot of their runs. They'll call it a recovery run, but it's the same as what they would run a 10K at. So it's kind of like, well, you've put this as a recovery run. Is that because you think it's a recovery run, or is that just because it's on Strava in front of everyone? So it's nice to discuss these kind of things. The injuries I tend to see tend to be in our masters runners. It tends to be from knee down, so calf, Achilles, plantar fascial pain, so foot pain. In our like junior runners or our senior runners from maybe about 30 down towards 18, it tends to be above the knee, so hip joints, so glutes, hamstring, quad, hip flexor, abdominal overuse as well. So we tend to see quite a nice split between our masters runners and also our junior runners. And one of the biggest things is master runners, they tend to not recover as well. So they tend to hit the same training block over 7 days as they were doing before, but they just don't have the same recovery elements in there. So that tends to be why the tendons tend to be overloaded too quickly, too soon.
Do you ever see any injuries where you just go, you should have seen a doctor 5 years ago. Why are you still running?
I think one of the biggest things that I always try and get across in one of my ethos is that runners like to run. And if it's safe to run and it's not going to cause any problems, can we actually modify your training to keep you running? I've got to meet the client where they are. So whether they should have been at a doctor 5 years before is probably not the question I would want to ask. I'm like, you're here today. What's stopping you just now? What can we do going forward? And if they need to see a doctor just now, that's something we can maybe discuss with them to go down that route and signpost them towards there. We can't change the past, but we can hopefully influence the future. And I think that it's making people more aware of their bodies and how they can manage things. Because if you run, going back to the 85% prevalence of injuries, you're probably going to have little niggles here and there. I often liken it to drive into Dundee in the average speed cameras. You're not going to be at 70 the whole way. You're going to be maybe at 75, and then you're going to drop down to 65 to make up for it. So you're never going to be training flat out. But you've also got to be able to train a little bit easier as well. So I tend to have a lot of discussions, a lot of analogies around about how to manage the load a little bit better. But I've never met a client where I've not been able to do something to help them or direct them to someone who can help them as well.
If somebody is injured, how do they know? Like a lot of guidance that I read online, if you got this, you wait 5, 10. Basically, don't interfere with the NHS.
Yeah.
When should somebody come and see you?
Yeah, I think with the NHS just now, they're under a lot of pressure. And I think I'm in a very, very luxurious job where I get 40 minutes with a client, and I also can see somebody within maybe a week or two, depending on what the waiting list is like. Whereas with NHS, sometimes that waiting list is a little bit longer. So things have deteriorated a little bit more. And then they're met with a 20 to 30 minute appointment where you can't really get on top of everything. So not to bash NHS, it's just that if you're looking to improve, we can spend time to help you improve. When should somebody come to see me? When either, it's a question I also always ask the client, what brings you to see me? So if you're saying, well, actually, I'm really sore in my knee, well, what is that pain stop you from doing? Because I'm sure you've probably ran with a sore knee before, but now you might not be running. So it might be, I'm not able to complete my training for my marathon. I might not be able to do my drills that I do in the evening, or I might not be able to go to work and have no pain. So that's the kind of things that stop me. So when should somebody come and see me is when they're not able to fulfill what they're wanting to achieve, be it their training plan, be it their drills, be it their normal day-to-day life. A lot of people come to see me because they can't sleep, and sleep's a massive thing. I can run during the day, but see at night time I can't sleep, and that's what brings me to see you. I want to get back to sleep rather than pain. So nobody hardly ever comes to see me because they're in pain. It's because it's stopping them from doing something, and that's when I would like to see people. Is when their day-to-day life has been changed because they're not able to do what they were doing before because of the symptoms.
Okay. When you say they can't sleep, is that can't sleep through pain, or they just can't sleep? Insomnia is
Yes, sorry, yeah. To clarify that, it'd be due to symptoms of either pain or discomfort or swelling. So you tend to find that during the day, because you're moving about, the joints get lubricated quite well with the synovial fluid. But at night time, we do a lot of our healing at night time. So sometimes it can throb, sometimes it can ache, sometimes it can be inflamed, and that just is enough to keep somebody awake. So that's when it starts to knock into the next day. They're feeling tired, they're feeling that brain fog. So it starts to impede on their day-to-day life. They can't function at work, so they're not getting slept. The more and more that happens, you start to fall into a little bit of a cycle of not being able to sleep. And then you want to try and make sure you correct that as soon as able.
okay. Going off on a different question. What's the difference between chiropractor, physiotherapist, sports masseuse, and any others that you can think of?
I think the big similarity is we're all trying to help. We're all trying to help. We've all got different tools. Um, I often like to think about it this way as the principles versus methods. The principles are always to get something moving, to get somebody stronger, to get somebody longer if they're tight. The methods are chiropractor through mobilizing the bones, massage therapist through mobilizing the soft tissue, yoga through stretching, Pilates through stretching and strength, and then PTs in the gym through strength. And so we've all got different skills to try and achieve the principle. What you often find is sometimes you need a different tool for the job in hand. So sometimes a chiro works really, really nicely if it's something that feels stiff and locked. Sometimes a massage therapist works better if you've got something that's feeling tight and restricted. So you can kind of work around about all these. With physiotherapy, we're quite good at doing probably a good level of all of these things. But at the same time, if we feel something would benefit from seeing a chiropractor, we'd probably direct you towards them. If something was actually nothing too bad but needs a little bit of routine soft tissue work, we'll probably direct towards massage therapy. We're really good in physio at taking people from A to H, i.e. this first part of the rehab, but PTs and strength coaches are really good at taking people from H to Z. So we're quite good at really trying to working with a lot of local PTs to try and get you onto your journey back into the gym, back into a long-term management plan. So we're kind of like really good at initial stage rehab and then progress to later stage and then progress them onto their normal lives as well.
You mentioned earlier that you're working with teams. What is it you can do for a team, and what teams have you been involved with?
Yeah, so part of my role here is to be the coordinator for the Grampian Institute of the Scottish athletes. So anyone that goes to Olympics, Commonwealth Games, or has podium potential, they get funded by the Scottish Institute. So we provide the physiotherapy for them. With that, opens the door for more travel. So you go traveling with some of the Scottish teams. So I've been away with swimming camps to Australia. We've been away to squash camps and competitions in Romania, curling all over the world, Korea, Russia, America, Canada. So it's been quite great for myself to see the world. What do I do? I've seen myself doing warm-ups, cool downs in airports. I've seen us do mobility sessions in the middle of a departure lounge. I've seen myself doing a warm-up session in the middle of a cabin doing cross-country skiing. So absolutely minus 10, 12 outside, and we're doing stretches inside in a cabin that's maybe half the size of the room here. I've seen myself treating people on toilet floors. It takes you to everywhere. So you're literally, when you're on travel with teams, doing many, many jobs. But part of the job is to make sure they're ready for the sport they're doing, they're traveling well. Sometimes you're probably the only medical person there, so you're kind of looking after their health and well-being as well. For example, we had an episode in Russia where it was just before COVID and two of the guys in the team got ill, so it's liaising with medical teams and the local support staff to take them to hospital and take them back again. So yeah, you can be anything from picking up the balls on a hockey trip to taking people to hospital on a curling trip. So yeah, there's lots of different experiences that you can get.
Going back to running, what have you been involved with races, like local races or even bigger races?
So as a physio or from myself taking part?
Both.
Um, Regarding taking part in races, the athletes I tend to work with would be based in the clinic. I wouldn't probably go to races itself. A lot of the clients I work with here would tend to travel individually to the races, so they wouldn't have a need for a physio to go with them. And when they're traveling with like a GB squad, they'd have a physio that travels with them. I've not actually done that. I've got a wee family now, so I tend to stay at home and leave that to the younger physios. But I quite like treating a client in clinic, having a good management plan with them, their coach, and also strength conditioning workers, and then trying to see how that plan goes into the race strategy.
What about your races? What have you done?
So I got into distance running mainly because I was giving out advice on running, and I hadn't done a marathon for about 8 years. And I thought my advice I'm giving out isn't really relevant anymore. There's so much better place people to give information. So I undertook a project to try and go under 3 hours 45 for the Stirling Marathon. So by doing that, I went to Run For It to get a proper pair of shoes. I went to a nutritionist. I went to a gym program from a strength and conditioning coach that I know really well. I got my training plan from a coach as well. So I was doing all the right things to learn about it and really immerse myself in it. Nowadays, I tend to run to get away from the family. It sounds really bad. So I tend to do a lot more longer runs now because I don't find I run very fast, but I can run for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Last year, I was fortunate enough to take part in the Backyard Ultra, which was a kind of a running scheme that came up throughout lockdown where you couldn't actually get everyone together. So people were logging in a Zoom call and just doing like a 4 mile loop in their own backyard. They started bringing that into one area so everyone could run around the same 4 mile lap. And it was just great. So we managed to get 100 miles there. Probably, I can easily say now, almost a year after, I probably could have run further, but at the time, that was my limit. I was done. And then that whole year was spent doing loops, and now I like to try and think about point to point. So I'm going to try and do the Great Glen this year from Fort William to Inverness, and that's where I was able to speak to yourself and one of the Brewdog runs, and you've obviously ran that route and got a lot of good tips and hints from yourself, and that's what the running community is all about, is that there's so much wealth of knowledge out there, and it's great. You can be on a run and bump into somebody and start speaking away, and next thing you've learned something, because everyone's got something they can pass on to the next person. So it's been really good spending some time with you on the Brewdog run for that.
Well, I spent it with you there. I've done the Great Glen 4 times, I think, and the backyard that you did in Blair Athol, I was running that as well.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, you just meet so many great people with a like-minded goal, and it's funny because I would speak to people in the clinic here and like, you're crazy, try to do 100 miles, but see, when you go into that zone, it's normal and it's normalized and crazy, and I think that we've all got a bit of crazy about us. It's just like, find people that are equally as crazy, and then you actually feel quite normal. It's weird to say, but yeah.
Going back to, you said that you hadn't run a marathon in 8 years because you thought your information was out of date. What is the biggest difference between then and now?
I think my biggest learning has been about nutrition, like hydration, nutrition, how important it is to have not just during the race a good level of nutrition, but also during your training to recover well. And the time frame, there's a really good doctor out, I might get this wrong, but it's Dr. Stacey Sims. I'm not sure if she's American or Australian. He does a lot of work with female athletes, and her book was fantastic. It just let me know about what the time frame after a run is for getting some of your nutrition back on board, versus before I'd come in from a run and just probably not even bother hydrating or like having anything to eat, and you're kind of missing that window to help the repair system. My learning in sleep has been a massive change as well. So it tends to be the low-lying fruit. Can I train better, more efficiently? Can I recover better, more efficiently? Can I sleep well? And can I eat well? That's probably my four main things that I've done a lot better, having just went away and looked at some of the research around about. Matthew Walker's a really good resource for the sleep. There's a guy, James Nestor, for breathing that makes a big difference, not just for during your activity, but it gives you a better quality of sleep, which then gives you better quality of repair, which means you can then recover better. All injuries I see tend to be either overtraining or under recovering. So I just need to figure out which one are they doing. They might be doing a bit of both, but kind of approach that. Well, they're in a marathon plan, I might not be able to. Can I make sure they're recovering better? Yes, I can. So sometimes it might be keep your training the exact same, but you have to make sure you're spending some time eating better, sleeping better. If your job's stressful, you might have to back off your training a little bit, because the body doesn't know the difference between stress from life and stress from training. It just knows that some sort of stress is going on board there. So if you've got a hectic life and you're taking on a marathon, the body's under a lot of stress there. So yeah, I think that four things, that would be my main learning points: sleep better, eat better, recover better, and the principles of training are more important than what I gave it prevalence to before.
Nutrition is something that I would say I enjoy. Do you have a favorite food or favorite nutrition to have during your run? Do you have something after your run? And have you got anything that you would treat yourself to after a run?
Yeah, I think during a run depends on length. I think the shorter runs, and sounds crazy saying this, but shorter runs will be up to maybe about the marathon distance. Probably try and get by on gels. So I use Torque gels and Tailwind. and that tends to be how I get my carbohydrate in. My longer runs, I would tend to have a little bit more solid food as well. During the backyard ultra, nothing was working. I had a really good support team, Dave Moore and Dave Andrews, and they were trying to fire these things at me. Nothing was sticking apart from jam sandwich and it was ambrosia rice.
Back to
So
basics.
back to the basics. And once that's stuck, it's amazing how your whole body just carries on well with it. Regarding a treat, I probably don't treat exercise as a thing I need a treat from. I probably treat myself a lot during it. I probably run to treat myself, but afterwards I quite like pizza beforehand, and I would probably have some sort of chicken dish afterwards. I'm probably big on my chicken, so I kind of like the white meat afterwards and the pizza beforehand. The D33, you come in and everyone's on the Guinness, and I'm like, I really want to like Guinness, I just can't get there. I'm trying.
Well, you said your support crew was Dave Andrews, so he'll be right up with the Guinness.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, the two Daves, Dave Squared is what we called it, and were great. And I also had my best mate at my wedding was Steve Taylor, who his knowledge of running isn't as experienced as the two Daves, but some of the stuff he was saying is like, don't overthink it, and it was quite refreshing to hear that. Don't overthink it. Just sit down, have something to drink, have something to eat, go back out again. It was quite nice to have the science there from the two Daves, and then having the sensibility hat on as well from Steve as well. So yeah, it worked quite nicely.
Well, you say that they were supporting you. Have you supported anybody else?
I haven't, no, and it's something that I'm I'm quite a positive person, and sometimes positivity is not what you want to hear. And I think that I would always look for the silver lining, and sometimes you just don't need to hear the silver lining, because I was the same when I came in from some of my laps during the last one standing. It's not everything's okay. Well, it's not. I just need to hear. Well, just put your jacket on, put your hat back on, put your head torch back on, and just go out again. The next time you come back in, we can see what about your mood is, because hitting somebody with positivity all the time is probably not the right answer either. And I think I would love to support somebody. I would just want to make sure that I was the right fit for them. My background is in physio, but I do a lot of work on the psychology of sport, and I've done a lot of background in the psychology of winning mentality. And I think that that's really nice on paper, but sometimes when you're in the heat of the battle, it doesn't come across as pertinent. So it's sometimes nice to have these mantras, but you've got to see what about the person you're supporting is. But I would love to in the future. Yeah.
During your last one standing, you said you had highs and lows. Not just during that race, but any race. Have you had, or any run really? Have you had any spectacular bonks?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because recently I've been really working with this mantra, this too shall pass. So like when you're running well, this too shall pass, so it won't last for long. So enjoy it, but also at the same time don't big yourself up. And also when you're having a bit of a nightmare, this too shall pass. So it's kind of thinking, okay, what do I need to do when I'm in the bonk to get out of it? What's happening first and foremost? Is it a hydration, nutrition problem? Is it a physical issue? Is it a running gear issue itself? So what is the main issue and how can I solve it? I did a lot of work with Don Vasey. I don't know if you come across him, percentage psychology. So he's not running himself, but did a lot of work with a psychological element before the last one standing. And it was quite nice having like we called it a shit list initially, but then it became like more of our systems manual. When this happens, do this. When this happens, do this. So it's more like if a plane takes off and a warning light comes on, they don't just land it straight away. They've got to figure out, go through the system and figure out, well, why is this light came on? What can I do to solve it? That's helped, or that hasn't helped. Go to the next thing. That's helped. Bennett Ultra was probably the biggest example. Really struggled with my stomach. Wasn't able to take any food on. So you then have the argument with yourself. Do you put yourself through a little bit of temporary discomfort taking food on board to help yourself get out of the bonk, or do you avoid taking food on just now because you don't think your stomach could handle it? So you've got to kind of think about making a decision, stick with that decision for a little bit of time. Has it helped? No, it hasn't. Okay, then go for option B. So it's being able to think a wee bit more clearly when you're actually in the heat of the moment, rather than the chimp side of your brain saying, okay, that's the race over. Think about the scientist or the computer side of things, thinking, actually, can I actually just work through a plan on how I'm going to get myself back on track? And sometimes that takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 hours. Sometimes it can be a bit of time to actually get back on track. And then the mantra comes back, this too shall pass. So you've just got to be in the moment again.
Okay. You said you're doing the Great Glen. Is that this year?
So 1st of July this year, yeah. So we'll gradually step up from Fetteresso, D33, Kirkhill 8, Salter 24, then we go into the Great Glen itself. So we're just slowly starting to build up our pair time. And I work alongside Janae Barand, who is my coach. So she sets up our work. And when we first started working together, her knowledge of ultra running was a wee bit less. But now together we've explored lots of different things. We're about, I think it's about 3-4 years now. And we're both quite good at this has worked, this hasn't worked. How do you actually build towards that? So yeah, it's been learning for both of us. So it's been good working with Ginny.
Do you have any either goals or dream races, bucket lists?
Yeah, the West Highland Way, I entered the West Highland Way this year, or I entered the ballot, and I wasn't fortunate enough to get in, but I think that from a runner being in Scotland, that would probably be the pinnacle for me. And I think if I was able to do that one, I'd probably tick it off and then start to come back down the distance again. I just think, yeah, I think the West Highland Way would be nice to do. And then once I've done that, I'd probably go back to marathon and below again. Yeah.
So your goblet would satisfy you. What about career-wise? Any aspirations? Where are you going?
Yeah, it's always a funny question because you always get asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? But I'm very much along the lines of if I work hard every single day and keep learning, my job where I am now was not where I expected to be 5 years ago, and I could never have preempted that because I've worked hard at learning about the foot. I've worked hard at learning with runners, and now I'm working with runners on feet. I'm kind of like in a nice place, and I keep on building an extra spoke to my skills. And where I'd like to see myself is continue doing what I'm doing. I'm really happy, and I don't see the same thing in a row. So I see lots of different issues, and the management of them is so complex sometimes that I'm happy with where I am. I do probably see myself going into a little bit of teaching further down the line, but as where I'm just now, I'm quite keen at working with runners, working with all sorts of injuries, but working with runners to achieve their goal and get really teeth torn into a client's goal can be fantastic. And when they achieve it, it kind of feels like you've achieved that with them, and you've been a small cog along the way. But at the same time, it's a sense of achievement as well, which is nice. And a lot of jobs don't give you that satisfaction, which physio does.
Well, James, it's great to hear that you're enjoying life, basically. So I think we're going to call it a wrap there. And thank you for this interview, and thank everybody for watching today.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.